Hello and welcome. I'm Vaishali Kohli and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories this hour. World leaders have started arriving in Johannesburg, including Modi, Starmer, Liakang and Anwar Ibrahim for Africa's first G20 summit. South Africa's agenda focuses on climate disasters, sustainable debt, energy transitions and fair mineral trade. South Africa and the EU signed a partnership on critical minerals ahead of the G20 summit, aiming to boost local processing and secure metals for clean energy, computing and defense. Leaders emphasized defending multilateral ISM, democracy and human rights. The U.S. is considering sanctions and Pentagon engagement to pressure Nigeria to protect Christian communities. Following Trump's earlier threats, Nigeria says claims of persecution oversimplify a complex security situation amid ethnic and religious diversity. Nigerian court convicted separatist leader Nnamdi Kanu of 7 terrorism-related charges. Now, Kanu, the founder of the band Indigenous People of Biafra, was found guilty of inciting deadly attacks while pushing for an independent Biafran state in southeastern Nigeria. Mali's capital faces severe fuel shortages as jihadist groups block key highways. Power cuts hit homes, hospitals and businesses, while rising prices and reduced services strain daily life. Authorities struggle to reopen supply routes amid ongoing fighting. The Kremlin says it hasn't been informed if Ukraine is ready to discuss Trump's peace plan. Meanwhile, Trump says the plan good for both sides, while Zelensky insists any deal must ensure dignified peace and has met U.S. officials in Kyiv. Russia says it destroyed 33 Ukrainian drones overnight across 5 regions, Crimea and the Black Sea. The attacks forced airport closures, injured 2 in Slavyansk-on-Kuban, and cut power to over 200 homes in Rostov. A separate strike on Ukraine's Zaporizhia killed 5. Trump called Democratic lawmakers traitors and said sedition should be punishable by death after they urged the military to refuse illegal orders. Meanwhile, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries condemned the remarks as unacceptable and dangerous. World leaders have started arriving in South Africa as Africa hosts its first G20 summit in Johannesburg. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has departed from New Delhi for a 3-day visit to attend the G20 summit. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has touched down in Johannesburg, where he will engage in 2 days of discussions and bilateral talks focusing on sustainability and economic growth. Chinese Premier Li Qiang and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim have also arrived in South Africa to attend the summit. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has reaffirmed that the United States will not be taking part in the G20 summit, denying South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's statement on the U.S. wanting to participate in G20. South Africa's planned agenda items include preparing for climate-induced disasters, sustainable debt for low-income nations, financing energy transitions, and ensuring the rush for critical minerals benefiting producers. I have my guest joining me on the broadcast, Osanyin Taiwo, Policy and Strategic Implementation Expert, and he's joining me from the city of Abuja, Nigeria. Now, I want to begin by asking you, how do you see the G20 summit progressing?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on NewsX again. Firstly, the G20 G20 that's going to take place starting from today. it looks, I'm taking it from different perspectives. I want to start from the geopolitical insights. Firstly, the participation of the president of India, that is President Modi, is a unique part or signal that determines India's leadership momentum over the next 2020, after the 2023 G20. However, India is positioning itself as a bridge between the global north and the global south, which is very obvious. And especially when we talk about digital infrastructure, climate financing, and global economic reforms. These are very important steps that are very critical for reinforcement for a long-term strategy across the interest of Africa and even for frontier investment in the energy cooperation and also in diplomacy. For Malaysia, if you look at Malaysia, Malaysia also plays a very critical role as well in terms of the importance of Asia in the economic architecture of the global space. With the attendance of Malaysia, it's also going to amplify the Asian voice in the global economic rulemaking and also reinforce a supply chain diversification that will also empower both the African, what you call the African continent and also the global world. Also, the D20 holding in South Africa is not just not only going to be a position for South Africa, it's also going to position Africa as a whole in that global space for economic transition and also for very fundamental economic reforms that will also improve the growth of Africa generally. Unfortunately, Nigeria is going to be absent from the G20 summit, considering the current situation that is happening in the country. That is the insecurity issues that has bereaved the country in the past few days, and the president has announced his absence. However, it is very contradictory when we hear different comments from the United States, who have once decided that they will not be participating in the G20 summit. But when we hear different comments like that from the president of South Africa, Ramaphosa, who says that US has changed its mind, it only gives a bit of contraction and a bit of confusion in the diplomatic space to understand that is America really knowing what they really want, or they're just being a confused system that want to just affect us, affect the global space and dictate the global space in a very wrong in a wrong framework. Having said that, it's very critical to state that the place of the United States cannot also be under amplified because they still play a very critical role. Even though we have countries like China, Russia trying to create a kind of high competitive space in the African region for possible African strategic leadership landscape around the diplomatic space. So while we discuss on that platform, the White House must also reorganize itself for proper diplomatic and proper economic framework across Africa.
And Mr. Taiwo, how do you see the United States not attending the G20 summit?
Well, it's very critical if the United States is not attending the G20. One, it's going to create a sort of lacuna in the diplomatic space. Not only that, African countries today have decided to show their allegiance and create a broader bond across China, India, Russia, and other European countries. And this is very critical because it only shows now that with the absence of America in Africa for this G20 in South Africa, it only shows that Africa can consider itself very key to say that to hell with the United States, and then they don't really not need the United States any longer because the United States has only shown that they do not really care about the African region. And so Africa can also take a collective point of view to say, okay, we are going to bring our allegiance to other countries in Europe and in Asia rather than the United States, which is very dangerous as well, considering the fact that America still wants to control the global world in terms of economy and in terms of technology.
Mr. Taiwo, please stay on with me. I'll come back to you. Now, the South Africa and the European Union have pledged to defend multilateral ISM ahead of the G20 summit, signing a new partnership on critical minerals. The agreement aims to not only extract minerals but also process them locally, boosting South Africa's move up the value chain. President Cyril Ramaphosa said the EU is seeking access to key metals vital for renewable energy, computing and defense amid concerns over supply from China. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen highlighted the need for fair and reliable supply chains to power the clean energy transition. Ramaphosa and EU leaders emphasized standing together to defend democracy, human rights and multilateral cooperation. I have my guest back with me, Osanyin Taiwo, who's a policy and strategic implementation expert, joining me from Abuja, Nigeria. Now, Mr. Taiwo, how do you see this development?
Well, firstly, we must understand that what does this agreement really mean? Well, the agreement is critical in terms of, it's critical in the sense of critical partnership with Europe, and considering the fact that Africa, basically South Africa, is heavily dependent on China for rare earth minerals, which is used for cars, electric vehicles, batteries, and green technologies. However, it is very critical to understand that this gives South Africa a sort of diplomatic leverage, economic benefit, and geopolitical relevance in the global energy transition when we look at the multilateralism between the EU and Africa and South Africa agreement. Furthermore, why is this multilateralism very important, and why does it matter? This agreement would once again reflect one of the critical beliefs of the global issues and global problems of cooperation that have evolved the African region in a very long while. South Africa and EU are very essential in this inclusivity, and this is going to give us a rule-based engagement that will also not create only global stability, but also create an engagement regarding climate financing, trade fairness, and also sort of sustainable resource extraction. What are the benefits to South Africa? Now, aside from the fact that these engagements are going to be very critical, it's going to, one, strengthen the investment flow in South Africa. Not only that, it's going to be an opportunity for job world, better bargaining power in the global space, and also we're going to reduce vulnerability from South Africa in terms of their commodity price volatility. So these are very critical parts. These are very critical issues that would actually be brought forward in this engagement and this signing that's going to take place between South Africa and the EU.
Mr. Taiwo, now the agreement also aims not only to extract minerals but also process them locally. How do you see that benefiting Africa's economy?
So this is going to benefit Africa's economy, considering the fact that Africa has the resources today. Africa is more of like, Africa practically controls over 45% of any minerals in the world, if not even more. And then this is going to give Africa the edge for controlling their resources. One, there will be low exports, which creates a kind of low payback in terms of the value variation on Africa's minerals. Two, thirdly, is that it's going to create a sort of bond between EU and Africa through the representation of South Africa. Four is that South Africa is going to be at a pivotal point, considering the fact that South Africa's economy is actually increasing. If you look at the African economy today, when we mention South Africa, we mention Egypt, Tunisia, Nigeria, we realize that South Africa is going to be at a pivotal frontier for driving this economic narration. Also, we must also understand that with this partnership and with this sign-off, Africa is going to be at an edge of ensuring that we have minerals that are duly processed, duly and completely processed in Africa, which gives Africa even a better bargaining power in the global space, and this will also improve the economy of Africa and development as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Taibu, for joining me on the broadcast. And now a senior U.S. State Department official says that the United States is considering actions such as sanctions and Pentagon engagement on counter-terrorism as part of a plan to compel the Nigerian government to protect Christian communities and religious freedom. Nigeria is under scrutiny from U.S. President Donald Trump, who in early November threatened military action over the treatment of Christians in the country. Meanwhile, Nigeria claims that Christians face persecution, misrepresent a complex security situation, and do not take into account efforts to safeguard religious freedom. Nigeria, which has 200 ethnic groups practicing Christianity, Islam, and traditional religions, has a long history of peaceful coexistence. But there have also been flare-ups of violence among groups, often exacerbated by ethnic divisions or conflict over scarce resources. And I have my guest joining me on the broadcast, Mr. Mahesh Sachdev, former Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria, and he's joining me from New Delhi. Now, Mr. Sachdev, how do you see this?
I think it's an unprecedented situation. Nigeria is reasonably peaceful, except for sporadic incidents of kidnapping and settler versus herders conflict that spurts off and on as herders grow to the greener pastures, often occupied by farmers. Many of the farmers are Christians, and settlers from the Fulani tribes are almost always Muslims. Similarly, kidnappers are mostly Muslim militants or people interested in making quick money before Christmas every year. Kidnapped people may or may not be Christians. They are, as pointed out by the local governor, the recent kidnappings of schoolgirls in Kebbi State were all Muslims. So much of it is hyperventilation by United States to appeal to its MAGA Christian base and to create a space to pressurize Nigeria or a quid pro quo on something else, which could be oil, which could be security-related purchases by Nigeria from United States, etc.
And now, Mr. Sachdev, now the question really is that Donald Trump has also threatened military action over the treatment of Christians in the country. Is it, according to you, the right move?
I don't think it's even intended to be realized. These are mostly rhetorical threats. Of course, Pentagon would be asked by White House to prepare plans, but Mr. Trump has always been against American boots on ground. So in the past 11 months or so, since has he been in power, the only time he has seen a military action is to bomb Iranian nuclear installations by an Air Force action. I doubt whether he would have violated this edict of his policy in Nigeria. The wording says that Pentagon is readying plans for anti-terrorism action. That could mean a lot of things. It could mean strengthening Nigerian defenses against terrorism. It could also mean neighborhood watch with regard to the neighboring countries where often terrorists find shelter. And it could have wider ramifications, as I mentioned earlier, on pressing Nigeria to do something tangible with regard to its security by procuring more military hardware from the United States.
All right, Mr. Sachdev, please stay on with me. I'll come back to you. Now, a Nigerian court has convicted separatist leader Nnamdi Kanu of 7 terrorism-related charges. Kanu founded the indigenous people of Biafra, which has been accused of terrorism and extrajudicial killings in the country's eastern region. Nigerian Judge James Omotosho stated that the prosecutors proved that Kanu's broadcasts and orders to his now-banned indigenous people of Biafra group incited deadly attacks on security forces and citizens in the southeast. Kanu had called for the creation of an independent state out of southeastern Nigeria. He sought to revive the short-lived Biafran Republic, a succeeded region of Nigeria between 1967 and 1970, which sparked the Nigerian Civil War. During that period, killing at least 3 million people before the Biafran troops surrendered. And of course, now I have Mr. Mahesh Sachdev, who's a former Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria, back with me, and he's joining me on the broadcast from New Delhi. Now, Mr. Sachdev, of course, this Nnamdi Kanu, who's been convicted of 7 terrorism-related charges, what would you like to say on that?
It shows several things. Firstly, it shows that Biafra war's ghost is still lurking in Nigerian social psyche. Biafra was happened, as you mentioned, in 67 to 70 period, where a bitter civil war broke out, and the federal government was able to reimpose its writ over Biafra, majority of whose residents were Igbo tribes people, through a very bitter and brutal war. Igbos have generally been well integrated into Nigerian society since then, but some sense of discrimination persists, particularly in high-ranking government jobs at the federal level. They have excelled in various professions such as medicine, engineering, and petroleum engineering particularly. And the area is rich in petrol. The crude, almost all Nigerian crude and oil and gas is exported from that region. Having said all that, Igbos currently do not have a critical mass of people who would like to revive Biafra, given the disastrous...
Mr. Sachdev, I'll have to interrupt you because we're getting in some breaking news coming in. Now, the gunmen in Nigeria have kidnapped 52 students from a Catholic school in Niger State, local media have reported. The government confirmed the abduction at St. Mary's School, but said the exact number of pupils is still being verified as security forces search for them. This is the latest in a series of attacks, including the kidnapping of 25 schoolgirls from a boarding school in Kebbi State earlier this week. Rising insecurity has put Nigeria in the spotlight and forced President Bola Tinubu to postpone foreign trips. And I have my guest joining me on the broadcast, Osanyan Taiwo, policy and strategic implementation expert, who's joining me from the city of Abuja in Nigeria. Now, to begin with, I'd like to just ask you, this, of course, is some breaking news that we're sharing with our viewers at the moment. I'd like your comments on it.
Thank you for having me again. It's so sad that we have a situation of insecurity in my dear country, Nigeria, today. And this is actually comprising of different attacks from kidnapping to terrorist attacks in different villages. And now this has even rippled down to what happened in 2014. That is the abduction of some young girls in Kebbi State. This was a reflection of what happened in 2014, where over 200 girls were kidnapped in Chibok in Borno State in 2014. This is unfortunate, and this is the reflection we have today. The good part is efforts have been made. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria has enforced security agencies to swing into swift action to ensure that these girls are released immediately. This has also made him not to attend the G20 summit, which I said earlier, and efforts have been made, collaborations have been enforced, and the state governor has been intensifying efforts with the security agencies, from the policemen to the vigilante groups and also to the military, who are working in synergy to ensure that these girls are brought back safely to their family. Although there are tensions that has reoccurred in this situation where parents are being panicked, and there are situations arising from the fact that the area is also being intensified with high security presence, and also not only that, villagers are also a bit afraid. So some people have discarded their homes considering this current attack. One thing that is very critical about all this is that this has some sort of reflection in Nigeria in the space of insecurity. And many may see it as a part of insecurity, but for me and from my overview, I look at it as a political economic front. Before, what we had before was adoptions, kidnappings, and killings. Right now, we've seen that this has become an economic tool in the hands of these terrorists, whereby they abduct people and then decide to negotiate these abductions for monetary purposes. And then one other thing is very critical and very sad is that politicians in Nigeria are now using this as a tool and a weapon to fight the government. This is a reflection of what happened in 2014, where the then president of the country, President Goodluck Jonathan, insecurity was a tool for him to be removed from office. And this is become a sort of narrative that is actually reoccurring again in Nigeria in 2025, where some certain groups of people see that as a tool to remove the current president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, from government. This is very, very sad, because some political figures are using it to finance their wicked atrocities in this country, and this would not hold water, because then the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Jonathan, may have been a bit timid in tackling this issue, but Nigerians are now well open to understand that when a certain region of the country becomes president, we have this kind of reoccurrence happening in the country incessantly, and this has become a kind of tool that most people want to use as a narrative to shift the government in place away from taking power. And it's just very sad that innocent children are used as a bait for this kind of evil atrocities.
Mr. Taiwo, thank you for joining me on the broadcast. And now Somalia's Election Commission has begun distributing voter ID cards in Mogadishu as the capital prepares for upcoming council elections under a one-person, one-vote system. At the Somali Independent Election Committee headquarters, printing operations run around the clock with 2 8-hour shifts, producing between 30,000 and 40,000 cards daily. Each printer generates 2,000 to 3,000 cards, and officials expect to complete printing across 7 districts this week. Across Mogadishu, nearly 1 million residents have registered to participate in the council vote, marking a shift from previous indirect election methods. The distribution process continues in the coming days as the city prepares for the landmark municipal elections. Despite the preparations, concerns remain about security conditions and political tensions between federal and state governments. Now, Mali's capital, Bamako, is under growing strain as a jihadist-imposed fuel blockade continues to choke vital supply routes. The insurgent groups are controlling key highways which have cut off the fuel deliveries, creating a severe shortage and leaving residents in long queues at the few stations which are still operating. The lack of fuel has triggered widespread power cuts affecting homes, hospitals, businesses, and public services. Authorities are trying to reopen supply corridors, but progress is slow amid intensified fighting in contested regions. Daily life in Bamako is becoming harder with rising food prices, reduced business hours, and increasing frustration among residents. The crisis underscores the expanding influence of jihadist groups and the deepening security challenges Mali continues to face. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.